elaborate on the, this is from Jean-Ray in South Africa. Um, can you elaborate on the importance of the earthly kingdom and situation now and the importance of the millennial kingdom? I'm not sure that I fully understand the question. Obviously, the earthly kingdom, earthly kingdoms in terms of nations here, really have no impact on the Christian. This idea that we need to have a situation where where we have control of the government, that somehow the government does what we want them to do, and that the government empowers us to preach the gospel. In fact, I listened to a sermon preached on this a couple of days ago, and the whole point was that we have to take control of the government so that we can have a platform to preach the gospel. Our permission to preach the gospel does not come from an earthly government. It comes from the Lord himself. And persecution is not a bad thing. In fact, I quite frankly believe that what the church needs right now is persecution in the Western world. I don't want it. I don't know. I don't think any of us really want that. But at the same time, it is in persecution that the church flourishes, and that the church is pure, and all of those things. And so we don't build earthly kingdoms. Whatever the kingdom or the nation or the country that we find ourselves in, whether it be pro-Christians or pro-churches or against churches, makes absolutely no difference. I mean, it obviously makes a difference in the practical reality of how we deal with things. But it makes no difference to the kingdom of God at the end of the day. I'm sorry if I didn't answer that properly, but I'm just struggling a little bit to fully understand the question. Second question is, can you clarify your comments on political involvement? Should Christians not be getting involved in, for example, pro-life campaigns and campaigning to keep marriage as a Christian institution? Oh, that's a very good question. And I'm going to answer most of that question in the next session. So I don't want to get into that in too much detail right now. The bottom line is that you can try and reform society through these kinds of things, through pro-life campaigns and marriage, not being homosexual, and all of those kinds of things. But that does not change the hearts of men and women. We don't have a commission, and we're going to speak about that. Our commission is to preach the gospel. Our commission is not to try and reform society. This is where we really get into trouble. So let me leave that, and if the next session doesn't clarify that, then we'll come back to that. Let me just say that, or re-emphasize what we said, and that is that we must fulfill our civic duty in the context of the countries that we live in. We must pay our taxes, and if your conscience allows you to vote, then you must vote, and you must vote according to your conscience. We participate in the things around us simply, first of all, to be obedient to the Lord in being obedient to the government, and secondly, to create a platform for the gospel. And when we are anti-government, that makes it hard for the preaching of the gospel. And as I've just said, we don't care if it's hard. But the problem is, if we have made it hard for ourselves, then we really have a problem, because we've tainted our testimony because of our involvement in things that we ought not to be involved in. But I think that we'll hopefully answer that as we go along. Third question, and I'm going to speed through because I want to not run out of time. The third question is from Christine McIver. I think I've got it right. To clarify, did you say we are now in the millennium? Thanks. No, we're not in the millennium, not by a long shot. I know that there are people who believe that. Basically, we call that amillennialism or amillennialism. No, we're by we're by no means in the millennium, and in fact, we're not in the tribulation either. I believe that we're seeing the beginnings of the tribulation. I think that we're seeing the birth pangs, but we're not in the tribulation and we're not in the millennium. In the millennium, Jesus will literally be on the throne in Jerusalem. It's going to be a very, very different world. So no, we're not in the millennium. A fourth question from Lynn Wilshire. Whilst we say we are not in the kingdoms of this world and should not be thinking of being national, should we continue to pray for our government as in Timothy? Yes, of course, we must pray for the government. We have very clear instructions, not just in Timothy, to pray for the government. But here's the problem. Our prayer for the government cannot be a partisan prayer. Here in America, most churches and Christians will pray for the government if the government is Republican. But if the government is Democrat, they will not pray for the government. Now that is partisan. That is praying that you're not praying for a government, then you're praying for a political party. And we have no instruction to pray for any political party. We are to pray for the government that we might live peaceably. And remember that the context in which Paul writes, Timothy and Romans, is in the context of a very vicious, ungodly, immoral Roman government who are suppressing the people of God. And yet he says, pray for them. And so, yes, we must pray for the government. We must pray for the men in government that they might be saved. We must pray that they will make wise decisions, and so on. But if you're going to pray zealously in the United Kingdom for a conservative government, then you must pray equally zealously should Labour come into power the next time. All right. And it's a little difficult because I don't know, I can't see your face, so I don't know if I've answered your question or not. But so I'm just flying blind and going by what I'm seeing. Jennifer Halliday says, what is the scriptural guidance on lobbying government for what we view as immoral laws, e.g. abortion? All right, I'm going to deal with that in the next session. I hope I do, and if I don't, then certainly please come back at me again in the next session, and I'll try and answer those questions. So we're going to speak particularly about these issues of abortion and homosexuality. Let me also just say to you that here's one of the problems, and that is that that we believe here in America, we believe, or not, I don't, but the vast majority of Christians believe that the Republican Party is the one that you have to support simply because the Republican Party is the one that is against abortion and is against gay rights. Now, I may use this again later on because it's a very important thing that we need to understand. I just did some research this last week. In looking at these major issues, and now follow through with me. I'm going to take a few minutes on this because I think this is important. The famous, and whether you live in the United States or not, we all know about Roe versus Wade, and that is where abortion was legalized in America. And Roe versus Wade was obviously a Supreme Court decision in 1973. That's a long time ago. When Roe versus Wade legalized abortion with a 7-2 vote, so there are 9 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. The vote was 7-2 in favor of abortion. Look at this. 6 of the 7 justices in the majority, 6 of the 7 justices who voted for abortion were Republican appointees. And of the 2 who opposed, 1 was Democrat. Now, what am I saying by this? I'm saying by this that governments may claim to be, or parties, let's say parties, claim to be anti-abortion. But in reality, they are not. Every year since 1969, the United States Supreme Court has been controlled by a majority of Republican-appointed judges. So the Supreme Court has been controlled by Republican-appointed judges. And there has not been a Democrat-appointed Chief Justice, in other words, the president of the Supreme Court, since 1953. So all the laws in the last 30, 40 years that have been passed by the Supreme Court or been ruled on by the Supreme Court have been ruled on by Republicans. It is under Republicans that we have abortion, that we have gay rights. In 2003, United States Supreme Court in Lawrence versus Texas overturned a Texas law against sodomy. Once again, in the 6-3 decision, 4 Republicans voted to overturn the law against sodomy. In 2008, the California Supreme Court overturned the state's ban on same-sex marriage. 6 of the 7 California judges were elected Republicans. And then from 2000 to 2006, Republicans controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency in those 6 years. In 2006, the FDA approved an over-the-counter abortion drug known as Plan B. The head of the FDA served at the pleasure of President Bush, a Republican. So the Plan B thing was brought in under Republican control. In 2015, Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriages, same-sex couples could marry. A majority, 5 of the justices were Republican appointed. So 5, and 5 is a casting, obviously is a casting, is a deciding majority. It was Republicans who brought in same-sex marriage in America. And very recently now in 2020, last week, I think it was, or week before, they upheld LGBT plus workers' rights in a 6-3 decision. And Republican-appointed justices were again in the majority. So all of these things, so to say, well, you know, we need X, Y, Z government or party in power because they will stand against these things. No, they will not. Our trust, and here's the point, here's the message that I trust that we're going to get through this whole thing. Our trust cannot be in men. It must be in God. All right, so I've digressed a little bit. Let me come back here. Vanessa Marnie, can you elaborate on what the kingdom of heaven on the inside of us would mean? The kingdom of God is a spiritual kingdom. It is not visible. You can't see it. I mean, you can say, well, you know, you can see it in the church, but remember, the church is made up. And when I mean the church, I mean the visible church. What you can see, what you see in the pews on Sunday. In any church, it doesn't matter which church, including the church that I serve in. There is a mixture. Some of those are believers and some of them are not believers. So that is not the kingdom. The kingdom is made up of every true born-again believer, and God is working in us. And here's the problem. God is working in us kingdom principles. Now, when I use that term, of course, everybody's hijacked that term, and we refer to prosperity and all sorts of other stuff as kingdom principles. No, kingdom principles begin in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That is the kingdom. Not blessed are those who will take power, those who will fight. The message I referred to earlier that I watched a couple of days ago, the title of the message is, we must fight. No, blessed are the poor in spirit. That is the kingdom. And we need to get we need to be those who exhibit the kingdom in the real sense of who we are. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are persecuted. All right. And I could go on that for a long time. So Lyle Peddle from Brisbane, Australia. Well, good to see you guys from Australia. I'm not even sure what time of the day it is over there, and I guess it's probably Sunday there by now. I'm not sure. Yeah, it would be Sunday night, I guess. All right. Lyle from Brisbane, Australia. Regarding the millennial reign of Christ, I've heard some preachers say it is a figurative 1,000 years. From what I read, this will be for a literal 1,000 years. Yes, I agree 100%. I believe that is literal. I believe that I am a literalist. I believe that the book of Revelation must be read and understood literally and not figuratively, unless it is very clearly in the context figuratively. But the tribulation is a literal 7-year tribulation. The millennium is a literal period of 1,000 years. All right. What else have we got? Just excuse the silence while I read. Nick Higgs says, thanks for getting up at 2 a.m. to answer the questions. Yes, it is. Not even sure. Yeah, it's 3:10 a.m. in the morning right now. Oh, Lyle Peddle says it's 8 o'clock Saturday night. All right. All right. It looks like we're almost done. Jandre has come back from South Africa. I didn't quite understand his question. Yes, I was talking about Kingdom Now versus Millennial Kingdom. We're not involved in Kingdom Now. The kingdom is not yet. It is not now, and there's all sorts of variations on that, dealing with the sons of the kingdom and all sorts of other stuff. And I think that we're done. Thanks, Robert, for your kind remark. All right, if there's no other questions, thanks, Robert. I appreciate your remarks. Then we'll end the stream, and then we will resume again. We will resume again at 4 o'clock my time. So I think it's 12 o'clock British Standard Time. So it's in 49 minutes. 49 minutes from now, the second session will go live, and obviously Deborah from Bethel has put up the link in the on the side on the discussions, or maybe at the bottom, depends on your screen, or you can find that in the email of the tickets that was sent to you. So yes, so the next one is the 12 British Summer Time. I said standard by mistake. All right. We'll talk again a little later. Bye-bye.